Thank you very much for watching. Now, as always, we could handle this conversation by ourselves, but I wanted to bring in an equal heavy hitter to the rest of the panel, here to fire up about China and how to respond to it. James Paterson is a senator from Victoria. He's got a bit of COVID beard going on there. I like it.
There's no better time, Paul, and I just aspire to be as strong and as yours is.
God love you, it'll get you everywhere. Michael Kroger is here along with Nicholas Rees and also with Bronwyn Bishop. So, James, look, there's a lot in here. Prime Minister was out there today basically saying, look, we don't like what the World Health Organisation has done, but we're hardly going to pull its funding, particularly because of what it's doing right now in the Pacific area. Is that okay with you, that as long as there's a focus on the Pacific, that's our main responsibility, or do you think we've got to pull the cash?
Well, the only organisation that has been more discredited than the Chinese Communist Party is the World Health Organisation. That's because we didn't have much faith in the Chinese Communist Party before this, but at least some people had some hope for the World Health Organisation. But their behaviour throughout this crisis has totally discredited them. The way in which in mid-January they were saying there was no human-to-human transmission, and the way in which when Australia shut its borders, they were saying that was an unnecessary, inappropriate thing to do, and the way in which they delayed declaring a pandemic. My view is the Prime Minister is absolutely right. The World Health Organisation does actually deliver some important services in our own backyard in the Pacific, but World Health Organisation reform is essential, and I think if it's necessary to get that reform that Australia puts on the table, our willingness to walk away, then I think we should do that. I don't want the World Health Organisation to think that they've got a blank cheque from Australia and that we will do nothing at all if they just continue in their broken ways.
Let's have a look at what that reporting was on Fox News tonight. And again, this is one of their straight news reporters who is putting it out there about information apparently being that they've seen inside mentionings on the diplomatic level coming from the United States back to China. Two parts. The second one is the one that really frightens me. But here's the first about where the virus comes from.
But there is a growing belief that the COVID-19 virus originated in the Wuhan lab, not as a bioweapon, but as China's effort to find and deal with viruses to show the world China was as good as or better than the U.S. on that front. It's believed that the virus was bat to human, and then the human, patient zero, worked at the lab, went into the population in Wuhan, and the virus quickly spread from there. China, according to sources, moved quickly to shut down travel domestically from Wuhan to the rest of China, but did not immediately stop international flights from Wuhan.
James, it's the second part of that I just want to focus in on. I'll broaden out the conversation, obviously, Bronwyn, Nick and Michael, about the first part of that. If that's true, that's frightening. The idea that they realised that there was a problem, but they were so afraid of telling the rest of the world. But the problem is that the very logic that meant domestic flights had to stop meant international flights had to stop, if nothing else, just out of Wuhan.
That's right, Paul. If that is true and if it can be confirmed, it's a very, very telling admission. It would show that the Chinese Communist Party knew that there was a problem, wanted to protect the rest of their citizens in the rest of China from that problem, but didn't feel the need to tell the world, let alone protect the rest of the world from that problem. Now, my fear is it will take a very long time and it will be very difficult for the truth really to come out about this because of the very nature of the Chinese Communist Party. When we think back to the Soviet Union, it was only years after the Berlin Wall fell that we knew the true horrors of the Soviet Union. We certainly knew they were an evil empire, but only the true horrors emerged decades later. And I fear that it will take decades for the truth to come out about this incident too.
Yeah, Bronwyn, I mean, let's try to focus on one of the two parts. Which of that Fox News reporting concerns you the most?
Well, it doesn't surprise me one bit. And I said on this very program almost a month ago that China had sent the virus out to the rest of the world, together with fear of the virus, and that they were then in a position to gauge just how long it would take to bring the free world to its knees.
So that makes it sound intentional.
That's exactly what it's done. I think the fact that it sent people out on aeroplanes knowing indeed that that virus was communicable from contact to contact, there was nothing accidental in my mind about that at all. And when you look at what has happened subsequently, with masks and equipment being literally purloined from our own shelves and sent to China, and then China sending care packages off to other parts of the world and saying, look, aren't we good? we've cleaned up the virus in our place, and now we're helping. We're a much better system than a free world system. It's not to me in any way a surprise or serendipity.
Yeah, Nicholas, it's that thing. It's that second part of the reporting. And look, when I was in the US, I met Brett Baer. I've heard plenty of good stories about him as a reporter, right? So if, automatically as somebody who's sort of a Fox News phobe, this guy is the straight news reporting, right? He wouldn't have put that to air lightly.
No, I mean, I think China has been guilty of some grievous mistakes around its handling of COVID-19. But there are parts of that story which I think don't stack up. I mean, I think what he's trying to say is that it didn't come out of a wet market by someone consuming a bat. It came out of a researcher, something going wrong in a laboratory, and then it's spreading from a mistake that happened in a laboratory. Well, I can tell you that people who work in infectious disease research, whether it's Australia or China, are pretty savvy when it comes to putting protections in place. And if you're an infectious disease researcher and you contract some disease from your workplace, you're going to take pretty prompt action to get on top of that, because that's your whole life.
Nicholas,
you spend your whole professional life working in this area, working on this. So you're you're going to know exactly what you need to do. Hang on, Bronwyn, just let me finish. You're the sort of person, because it's your entire working life, you're going to know exactly what you need to do. And that's got nothing to do with the Communist Party in China. That's just got that's to do with a human instinct and self-survival. As for the second claim around the flights, well, let's find out. Flight tracker and flight data will give us the evidence to know whether that's true or not. So next week, Paul, when we're on the program, let's go back to this story. Let's not just let it run off, never to be answered. Let's actually, by next week, we will know whether that accusation is true or not. And let's save the slander for China until whether we know with the data.
Nicholas, I'm working 12 hours a day on the show. I'm not putting bullshit to air, okay? All right, and I just thank you for saying that I'm just here filling airtime here, mate. But there is a bit of thinking that goes into putting the show to air. But by the way, on the World Health Organization front, here's the latest about their response, and then Michael, I know you wanted to talk about that.
Is back up on its feet again. The last patients left this field hospital in Wuhan, and the facility has now shut. China is slowly moving on from a crisis that America is still in the thick of, and Donald Trump is looking for someone to blame.
I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus.
The backlash has been swift. Bill Gates, the WHO's second largest donor, tweeted to say that halting funding for the World Health Organization during a world health crisis is as dangerous as it sounds. And the Director General of the WHO made his feelings perfectly clear.
We regret the decision of the President of the United States to order a hold in funding to the World Health Organization. This is a time for all of us to be united in our common struggle against a common threat, a dangerous enemy.
There is another angle to all this, and that is Donald Trump's dislike of the United Nations. And the fact that he's chosen now to have this battle with the WHO shows really the failure of the UN to have any kind of real influence during this global pandemic. The White House hasn't decided how or when it will cut off funding, and the WHO says it doesn't know yet what the effect of it will be. But
yeah, that's a view of it. But Michael, yours?
Well, mate, the UN's only done self-damage as it does usually. We've had the Human Rights Committee of the UN, which has been a millstone around their neck for decades for all the reasons we know. We've had the General Assembly attacks on Israel, which go on and on and on and leave unscathed all the really repressive regimes in the world. And then, lo and behold, we uncover the World Health Organization. Bill Gates is embarrassed because he's giving money to this organisation. That's why he's upset. And Trump's instincts on this are absolutely correct, but not for the reasons he's explained. This fellow Tedros is unfit to run the World Health Organization, not because of his kowtowing to China, although that's enough in itself, But people haven't looked into his history. For 11 years, this man was both the health minister and the foreign affairs minister in the Ethiopian government. What was the government of Ethiopia? It's basically a Marxist-Leninist organisation which was repeatedly criticised by Human Rights Watch and other international groups such as Amnesty for repeated human rights abuses year after year after year. He was a senior minister in that government from 2005 to 2016. His history, by the way, is that he was one of the members of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which was a Marxist-Leninist group which threw out another Marxist-Leninist government in 1991 run by Colonel Mengistu. And his group took over, he became a minister, and they've been involved in, through the security forces, murders, disappearance, killing of children, opposition leaders imprisoned and murdered, etc., etc. This went on all through his period as a minister in that government. But just irrespective of that, they elected him head of the WHO. What an absolute disgrace. I wouldn't give $1 to any organisation run by this character. And the Australian government, I know Josh and got to be very diplomatic. I wouldn't give them a cracker whilst that bloke's running it. You say, yes, we'll give you funding when this bloke's gone. He doesn't deserve to be anywhere near the WHO, quite frankly.
All right, James, you get the last word on this about how we move forward here. The truth is that there's a certain thing we can do when we've got 25 million people, but there's a reality to the education system, to the tourist sector, let alone those who like to export, and what we import. How do we renegotiate this relationship, and is it even possible?
Well, we'll start by reforming the World Health Organization, and the best thing we can do is ask that they admit Taiwan as a member, because that is the thing that the Chinese Communist Party would least like them to do, and that would be the best evidence that they're no longer beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. But in terms of a broader reform of our relationship with China, my view is it needs to be totally reset on a much more equal basis. We can't have any more of this preemptive kowtowing where Australian politicians as business leaders don't speak their minds about human rights issues or Australia's national interest or our sovereignty out of fear that we might offend the Chinese Communist Party, let alone actually offending the Chinese Communist Party. We have to reduce our dependence on trade with China. We have to broaden that to other countries. And we're going to have to be a bit more self-sufficient in some critical supply chain areas too.
Agreed. Lads, lady, thank you very much. Always good talking to you, Senator. Nick and Michael, and you, Bronwyn, all the best. Take care.